Hello and welcome to the second episode of My Daily Trivia. I'm your host, Danny, and welcome back to our second episode. It is Tuesday, July 18th. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you're ready for another round of 10 trivia questions. For those of you who missed yesterday's inaugural episode, this is a 10-round quiz show where we run through a gamut of general questions, broad categories. Each day it gets progressively harder. Yesterday was Monday, the easiest day of the week. Today is going to be a little bit more challenging. And if today is easier for you, then we're going to try again tomorrow and getting progressively more difficult until Friday is the hardest day. So without further ado, let's get into the questions. Question number 1. Which country is known for flamenco dancing, bullfighting, and paella? And the answer is Spain. Flamenco is an art form based on the various folklore music traditions of southern Spain. Bullfighting has existed in Spain since pre-Roman times, possibly even prehistoric, and paella is a Spanish dish of rice, saffron, chicken, or seafood, cooked and served in a large, shallow pan. I hope you enjoy my pronunciation of paella. My wife made sure that it was correct. Question number 2. What is the chemical symbol for the element gold? And the answer is AU. The chemical symbol for gold is AU. Gold is a chemical element with the symbol AU and atomic number of 79. Chemically, gold is a transition metal and a group 11 element. I'm not a science guy, but I'm sure that means something to someone out there. It is also one of the least reactive chemical elements, although you wouldn't guess it based on how people react when they're around it. Moving on to question 3. Which part of the human body is responsible for producing red blood cells? And the answer is bone marrow. Red blood cells are formed in the red bone marrow of bones. Stem cells in the red bone marrow are called hemocytoblasts, and they give rise to all of the formed elements in blood. The body makes about 2 million red blood cells per second, which, if you consider that means that you've already made tens of millions since even just listening to this podcast. Quite something. Moving on to question 4. Which culinary technique involves cooking food in a small amount of fat over high heat? The answer is sautéing, sauté. Originating from a French word that means to jump, sautéing is performed over a burner in a hot, shallow pan and uses a small amount of oil or fat to coat food for even browning. This method cooks food so quickly that you have to keep the food moving by tossing or flipping. And fun fact, my wife is from France, born and raised, and she got that one wrong. Moving on to question 5. Which fish is known for its ability to change colors to match its surroundings? And the answer there is the cuttlefish. Cuttlefish can change their appearance by hiding or exposing bundles of pigment, contracting muscles that alter their skin texture, or by exposing reflective pigment proteins. Cuttlefish are not actually fish by most definitions, despite their name. In fact, they're actually a type of mollusk. And if you haven't seen them in action changing their color, I highly recommend to look it up. I was actually kind of expecting them to just be changing maybe from like a black to a gray to a brown to a beige, sand-colored, blending in with their surroundings. But in fact, they're actually changing from purples to greens to blues. It's quite remarkable. Moving on to question 6. Who is the author of the famous novel Pride and Prejudice? The answer there is Jane Austen. Jane Austen was an English novelist known primarily for her 6 major novels. By basing her novels in the context of daily life, making the plotline believable, and providing main characters with happy endings, Austen produced literature that readers were able to relate with. Now, admittedly, I've tried to read as many classic novels as I have. It's an ongoing project. I have not gotten myself around to reading Jane Austen. Perhaps I should now that I know a little bit more about her and her work. Moving on to question 7. Which film won the Best Picture Award at the 2020 Academy Awards? And that movie was Parasite. The South Korean film Parasite was named Best Picture at the 2020 Oscars, becoming the first non-English language film to take the top prize. I've seen the film, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. Moving on to question 8. Which Shakespearean play features the famous line, quote, "to be or not to be"? That is the question. End quote. The answer there is Hamlet. To be or not to be is the opening phrase of the speech given by Prince Hamlet in the so-called nunnery scene of William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. In the speech, Hamlet contemplates death and suicide, weighing the pain and unfairness of life against the alternative which might be worse. I was a bit of a theater kid in school, did a bit of Shakespeare myself, never got around to doing that one. Question 9. In what sea does the Nile River end? That answer there is the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile River flows from south to north through eastern Africa. It begins in the rivers that flow into Lake Victoria, which is located in modern-day Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And finally, the river empties into the Mediterranean Sea more than 4,100 miles, or 6,600 kilometers for folks outside of the United States, to the north, making it one of the longest rivers in the world. Finally, question 10, our final question of this Tuesday's round of trivia. Which iconic green space in New York City is often referred to as the lungs of the city? And that answer is Central Park. Central Park is an urban park between Upper West Side and Upper East Side neighborhoods of Manhattan in New York City, United States. It is the 5th largest park in the city, which is surprising to me. I actually did not know that. I've personally never been there. It contains 843 acres, and it is the most visited urban park in the United States, with an estimated 42 million visitors annually as of 2016. Well, that concludes our Tuesday's round of My Daily Trivia. I want to thank you for listening. And again, if this was an easy episode for you, great. Check in tomorrow. We'll make it a little bit harder for you for Wednesday's episode. For those of you who may have found it a little more challenging, I encourage you to listen the rest of this week. You may find some answers that you know, and you may find that perhaps you're even better than you think. Or if you're not, maybe you'll learn something. Again, this is Danny, and I want to thank you again for listening to My Daily Trivia, and we'll see you tomorrow.